It is game day for Texas A&M at South Carolina. The Aggies looking to move to 6-0 in the SEC for the first time ever. They're already 5-0 for the first time ever in conference play, in SEC conference play, I should clarify. And 6:30 kick tonight, Central Time. We're going to be taking a look at some of the things we're looking forward to in that game. This is the All in Aggies YouTube channel, the All in Aggies podcast, part of the All in Sports Network and the Rogue Sports Media Network. But before we get into the game, I just wanted to offer my continued condolences to former colleague of mine and a friend, Chris Radcliffe, who meant so much to the people at my news family, KCEN and 6 News in Waco Temple. For those that don't know, I work out at the NBC affiliate, as I mentioned, KCEN for Waco Temple, also KAG serving College Station. And on Wednesday, we received the terrible news that Chris had passed away. And he was with the station. He was only 51 years old. He was with the station for 22 years, hit everyone like a ton of bricks on that day. And we spent that day kind of reflecting. Thursday, we came back. We gave a tribute show for him. And we included a tribute to his service in our sector, our sphere. He was a sports anchor before he was anything else. He ended up doing morning news anchoring, and then he was our evening news anchor. Again, he was with the station for 22 years and just passed away unexpectedly on Wednesday. Chris was so kind and always someone, something I appreciated about him. Not that this is the most important thing, but as a sports guy, when we talk about this or that or just sort of banter, in the newsroom during breaks, I always, talk on here about how I love not just the big sports that have hundreds of thousands of people filling their stadiums, but even the ones that maybe just have hundreds or thousands of people, track and field, golf, tennis. And he was always so enthusiastic about like, hey, check this out. Oh my gosh, like, look at this. And he would get so into it. And he reminded me a lot of my dad with his love for baseball. He was a former junior college pitcher himself back in the day. He, my dad and I grow up and my dad has a love for baseball, and he's big into the history of the game and all this stuff. And Chris wasn't so old to where he felt like he could have been my dad. He was 50, as I mentioned, 51 years old. I'm 32. But that dynamic was very similar, and it was nice to be able to kind of come in and enjoy, like, we can riff about like 1990s Atlanta Braves, growing up as a kid in Atlanta, and he could go off on like, oh, yeah, man, Tom Glavine, people overlook him at the lefty, and I was saying on air, I'll include a tribute that we did for his sports career and KCN. We were watching game 4 of the World Series on that Monday, and he was just at his desk. Freddie Freeman hits a home run, and he just looks up and goes, oh, he did it. 6 games in a row. He tied the record. Like, it was, I don't know. He's just, someone said he's a baseball encyclopedia. It's so true. But more than that, he was a really good friend. He meant so much to so many people. And I really want to extend my sympathies, not only to his family, but especially to those at my KCN family who knew him the best. I was kind of in and out. It's a long story, but we started working together about a little more than a year ago. And then really we had Nicole Sheeran working over in Waco. So I kind of handled things in College Station. She did Waco. She left at the end of June, beginning of July. So right around that time period, I started in summer. So there's not like stuff happening. I'd start going into the office, a few times a week. And then, every other week he's anchoring the 5 and 6 and then taking off for the rest. And then every other week he's staying through anchoring the 10 o'clock. That was just a rotation they had with Lindsay Littman, our other news anchor. So kind of like every other week on those nights that I was there, we'd be able to just talk and converse, in between shows, that in between a 6 o'clock show and our 10 o'clock show about, you name it. And he was just a larger than life presence in that newsroom, and gonna miss him. And that is why I've been away for a few days. I hope you can understand. But we're gonna get back into it now and talk about what Chris would probably want me to talk about. Let's look ahead to this college football Saturday, because it is going to be an exciting one for Texas A&M. All right, the things I'm looking for in this game for the Aggies. First of all, before I get into the pecking order, top 5 things I'm looking for, I just got to say, I've seen a lot of talk about people favoring Texas A&M, or let me start that over. I've seen a lot of talk with people leaning South Carolina, favoring the Gamecocks, thinking South Carolina is going to come out with a win against Texas A&M. I've really looked hard at this, and I understand it's not out of the realm of possibility, but I just don't see it, to be honest. I look at the strengths on strengths and strengths on weaknesses, and I do not see where South Carolina has the edge, other than this will be at Williams-Brice Stadium at night at home. But Lenore Sellers, I have question marks, especially against this defensive front with the pass rush for A&M and the protection for South Carolina. You know, the strength on strength of A&M's run game against South Carolina's rush defense, it works out. And that pass rush against their offensive line, that's a strength for A&M against a weakness for South Carolina. I just don't see anywhere where South Carolina has a comparable strength of theirs contrasting with a weakness for Texas A&M. Okay, you know, South Carolina, since the Notre Dame game, and I know that counts, and you want to say, you know, you can't throw out the games, you know, the outliers for convenience. But I would argue, and I think anyone watching this team would say, Texas A&M is a different team, has shown themselves to be a different team since that loss to to Notre Dame in week 1. Since that game, Texas A&M has not scored less than 21 points. The teams that have scored less than 21 points against South Carolina are Old Dominion, Kentucky, Akron, and Oklahoma. I think South Carolina is very good at exploiting teams with huge weaknesses. A&M has weaknesses, but I don't think they have any glaring deficiencies that South Carolina is going to be able to lean on to totally disrupt the game. Even what they do well, it goes well with what A&M's been able to do. It's like A&M's offensive line has been good. South Carolina's defensive front is good. Their pass rush is good. Will they be a tougher test than most of the teams A&M has faced? Sure. But will they be something so overwhelming that A&M will not be able to handle it? I don't think so. And I think you have the ultimate ace in your back pocket, knowing Marcel Reed, if he does not start this game, he will come into this game to save Texas A&M if they need him to. And I'm not saying he'll come into the game, period. Like, he will come in and he will change the dynamic and he will get the job done. I feel very confident of that, because I do think Connor and Marcel are different enough that the odds that you're able to both get at Connor and hold up in the secondary and make him ineffective, and switch things up with Marcel Reed and be similarly as effective with that offensive scheme, I think is highly unlikely. And again, I really think South Carolina, I do not think is going to score a lot of points in this game. I think if South Carolina, I don't know if the South Carolina scores 20 points. I mean, the over-under is like 44.5, so Vegas would sort of agree with that, in that, 20, 23 points is right around where they think they'll finish in this game. So I just don't see an upset today. I know you can't overlook anybody. I know it's an SEC team on the road. I understand all that. But I just don't. They don't strike the fear of God in me in terms of someone that you really have to be. You have to take them seriously, but I don't go into this anxious, nearly as anxious as I did LSU at home, as I even did Mizzou at home, or even Florida on the road with Marcel Reed, his first start, what we knew about him then and what we didn't know about him then. So I'm just going to say that off the top. I think Texas A&M, I don't think there's ever a point in this game where we seriously feel like second half, man, South Carolina looks like they're going to pull this off. I just don't. They might be close because it might be lower scoring, but I don't think you're ever going to get to a situation where you feel like South Carolina has the edge. Maybe this will all come back to bite me. I'm highly dubious of that. All right, 5 things I'm looking for. Number 5, no turnovers. Just no turnovers, okay? Now, as much as I talk about, I don't think the upset's going to happen today. Let's, do our due diligence and appreciate these teams. Let's take them seriously and approach this from okay, if this does come into dogfight, these are the things that come into play. If South Carolina's going to win this game, they're going to get turnovers. And they're going to get high-impact turnovers that are either near the goal line for the A&M offense and take away scoring opportunities, or set up, if they're not defensive scores themselves, set up the offense with the short field. Because I don't think South Carolina's going to be able to move the ball often and effectively against this A&M defense. So you cannot turn the ball over at all. Hard stop. But A&M's been good at that for the most part. I know Connor Wigman's been a little shaky at times, but I think A&M has been pretty good about taking care of the ball this year. I would assume that happens today, and maybe I think they could force some turnovers too. So win the turnover battle is an extra bonus, but really just don't lose it for the most part. Number 4, offensive line protection. This goes to one of the strengths for South Carolina is the defensive line, the pass rush. But it's a strength for A&M too. Like, that's the thing that that gives me confidence. I know they've had their moments, but offensive line has held up pretty well to this point. But if South Carolina is going to make things interesting and force turnovers, I think a large part of that's going to have to do with turning up the pressure. And I think really where that comes into play the most is if Connor Wigman does get the start and your protection is not holding up, then maybe that can get you into a rut long enough to where you're behind long enough. And I think he'll have a shorter release than he did against LSU with Marcel Reed in the wings if it is Connor Wigman starting. But, O-line protection is so crucial for Connor Wigman. Less so for Marcel Reed. I mean, I'd still like to see it, right? But it could really throw Connor off his game. And so maybe it could dig you in a little bit of a hole that you don't want to dig out of. So offensive line protection and then kind of getting the run game going as well. Just speaking to that offensive line. That's a strength on strength. A&M's run game against South Carolina's rush defense. Now, again, I think South Carolina is better at beating up on bad teams, like bullying bad teams, than they are at stopping good teams. I think there's a pretty big drop-off once you get to a certain threshold. But, I mean, you give them their credit. They're not, even against the good teams, they're holding up fairly well. So you got to give them that. Number 3, explosive touchdowns, explosive plays offensively for South Carolina. I don't think, like I said, I think it's going to be a slog for them to move the ball. And the one thing you can't have is a bust like we saw against LSU, right, with the slant that goes for the long touchdown. And just think to the LSU game for a second. 17-7, the 2 touchdowns one was set up on a short field off a turnover, a fumble, and then one was a busted play. Nick Carber's one of the fastest wide receivers in the league. Rocket Sanders is pretty good running back. So can't allow an explosive play at all. Or certainly one that goes for, it's one thing, 20, 30-plus yards. That might happen over the course of the game. But one of these 40, 50, 60, 70-yard touchdowns or massive gains, if you limit those, I don't know how South Carolina gets into rhythm. Number 2, overcome a slow start if you do. Because, we talked about it after LSU. The one thing I think that's the test for this team that we haven't seen to this point, we've seen them, pull away from, let's back it up. At home, we've seen them take care of their business, and we've seen them overcome a slow start at home against LSU. We've seen them not put teams away at home, but find a way to push through at the end of the day. We've seen them against Arkansas kind of just hang around and find a way to make those last plays at the end. What we haven't really seen is the one thing we haven't seen, falling behind significantly, double digits on the road in a true road environment, and then putting their head down, putting some drives together, coming back and coming back to win the game. We haven't seen that. Okay. Now, hopefully they're not in a position to do that. And that's plan A, right? But I'll be interested to see, because it's tale as old as time, right? The longer you keep South Carolina in the game, the more live that crowd gets, the more it feels like is riding on each play. And if you slip up, the more it'll feel like this is our moment, if you're South Carolina, to break through and to really get the job done and finish them off. Okay. That's how South Carolina's going to be feeling. So overcome a slow start to not let them feel that, but also be real interested to see how they respond if they do fall behind big early. You know, I don't think you could start a game I don't think anyone could start a game as bad as A&M did 2 years ago with the kickoff return, the Haynes King walking to the line of scrimmage, ball snapped off his leg, and it goes right to a South Carolina guy who picks it up seamlessly. Darn near takes it back, and then a pick after that, 17-0 before you blink. I don't think anyone could start off that bad, but if they do start off, you know, if they fall behind by 10, 13, 14 at any point in the first half, I'll be interested to see how A&M responds. And then number one, the obvious answer is the quarterback, and I'll touch on that in a bit, but really I want to see the wide receivers get loose again, because I think this wide receiver room has more in the tank than it showed. And I'm not saying they've been a disappointment or they've underperformed. I'm not saying that, but I think we've seen so much growth throughout the course of the year from so many aspects of this team. I think the receivers are still an area where it feels more or less like A&M is where it was when it started the year. I'd like to see that start to change a little bit today and have, you know, guys winning one-on-one battles, not just to get open, but, you know, if it's contested catches or what have you. I'd like to see that. You know, Ja'Day Walker's going to be out for the first half with the targeting call. So there's another like challenge for that group. How do you respond? I'd like to see A&M kind of help out their quarterbacks in that regard. And then look, I think just touching, this isn't necessarily a point on my pecking order, but as far as the quarterbacks, I would say my hunch would be more likely than not we see Marcel Reed. But if we see Connor Wigman, I would not be surprised to see Marcel Reed in situations. I would not situational play. I would not be surprised to see a shorter leash for Connor Wigman. I think Marcel Reed will have the longer leash unless he's just wildly inaccurate and having time to throw and just throwing bad balls. I don't really anticipate that happening, that both of those things would happen. So my hunch is we'll see Marcel Reed. And, you know, I don't know that either guy can have a game unless someone just puts on a Heisman-like performance where you say, okay, this is clearly their team moving forward. It's not a question week to week. I think we'll probably have this question week to week for the rest of the season. Is it going to be Marcel? Is it going to be Connor? Are you going to go back? Did you do this just for the game plan? Like if Marcel plays, did you do that because South Carolina's got a good pass rusher because this is Marcel's team now? I think we'll see that. Really, I just want to see whatever quarterback is in there, maximize the opportunity. You know, if it's Connor Wigman, if it's a situation like last week where Connor Wigman doesn't have a lot of help and he underperforms and it's disappointing, that's one thing. I can live with that. That's something where, okay, coaches need to adjust the game plan. But if it's something where Connor Wigman has time, he's inaccurate, receivers aren't getting open, and then maybe he's forcing it, or Marcel Reed is making plays with the leg, but tries to stay in there and and force throw the ball sometimes and overcomplicates it, and then he gets in a little bit of a funk. Wouldn't want to see that. But short of that, which I don't anticipate, I just want to see kind of a smooth operation from the quarterback position. So real quick to recap, number 5, no turnovers. Number 4, offensive line protection. Number 3, explosive touchdowns, explosive plays for South Carolina. Don't have them. Number 2, overcome a slow start if need to. And number 1, wide receivers get loose for Texas A&M. Again, 6:30 kick Central Time, 7:30 Eastern in Columbia, South Carolina. Be sure to stay tuned here. All in Aggies. I will probably have a recap up Sunday morning because I'm going to be covering for my KCN family, as mentioned. I'm going to be covering the Baylor TCU game today. So I'll be up in Waco. So by the time I get back, it'll probably be like 12:30 just by the time I get back. And then by that point, night. So I'll probably see y'all Sunday morning with a reaction. Maybe I'll hop on the you know what? I'll see you Sunday morning. I was going to say maybe I'll hop on the phone there at the field, but I won't really have a time to fully watch the game back. I want to fully watch the game back before I come on here and tell you my thoughts, because I'll be able to kind of watch hit and miss maybe at times as some work stuff pops up. So thank you so much for watching. Again, this has been Peck on the All in Aggies YouTube channel, All in Sports Network and the Rogue Sports Media Network. Let's see how the Aggies do, and appreciate you taking the time to check in with us. We will see you back here tomorrow.